Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel like today is a historic day with the things that have happened, with the MLA being kicked out of caucus, with government out of control. And the question is how do we get control of the people that we've elected? And that's what Bill 208 is all about, the Recall Act. Mr. Speaker, I believe this is one of the most important bills we will debate in the legislature because it goes to the very heart of what it is we as elected members are entrusted with. This bill is entirely about accountability. Accountability to the people who actually elected us to this House. The election of MLAs to this House represents a sacred trust between voters and the individuals they select to be their voice to or within government. Representative democracy is one of the cornerstones of a free society, and there must be a true connection between citizens and their representatives in order to ensure good government. But what happens when that trust and when that connection is broken? What options do citizens have to restore their voice? Unfortunately, in Alberta, that answer to the question is nothing. There's nothing that they can do until the next election. Under our current system, there is no true accountability between MLAs and their constituents between elections. If an MLA does something to break trust, whether that's supporting an unpopular policy, position or bill, breaking an election promise, or simply proven to be an ineffective representative, citizens are completely powerless to replace the MLA. Let me discuss a few sentences. So pass the bill. The Honourable Minister of Energy says they crossed the floor, and I would say, so pass the bill. We would be happy to vote for it. That's why we're presenting this bill to the House. Citizens are completely powerless to replace their MLA or the Environment Minister, let alone the Energy Minister. Let me discuss a few scenarios that I hope will give members pause to consider supporting this bill. Right now, an MLA can break an important election promise mere weeks into a 5-year mandate, thereby breaking the trust of voters, and not have to face the people who elected him or her until the next election. Or perhaps they don't want to be re-elected, and so they can go on their own agenda. Those voters would also be forced to live with an MLA who they can no longer trust. They'll be less inclined to work with that MLA over the duration of the term, and the MLA risks losing touch with his or her community. Again, MLAs can conceivably lose interest in a job weeks into a 5-year term and be missing in action until the next election. That's a long time for citizens to go without proper representation. The Energy Minister certainly is having his little fits here today, and that's good. He's aware and awake. A great fear of recall, I'm sure. Or Energy, former Health Minister, I mean, what a disaster that's been. How many times would he have been recalled if we had this bill in this sitting? MLAs may deceive or cover up past actions that would give voters a good reason not to vote for them and face no immediate repercussions should those truths be revealed after they are elected. Unfortunately, politicians who misrepresent themselves to the voters during an election campaign are a fact of life. We could never make a law to outlaw politicians who deceive, but we could certainly make a law that would empower citizens to recall politicians who do. And that's what Bill 208 is mainly about, giving citizens a mechanism to ensure good representation between elections and to empower citizens with a way to stop bad bills that are before the House. There's much more to recall than an actual act of recalling a politician. I believe having a law in place will lead to a host of improvements in our democracy. Right now, especially under this government, strict caucus discipline has stripped away accountability from MLAs and left their constituents without a proper voice. MLAs are expected to represent party interests first, constituents' interests second, if at all. We have seen earlier today what happens when MLAs dare speak out against their own government when that government fails to act in the best interest of the people they represent. They are kicked out of caucus. We saw it last summer when the Honourable Member from Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo. We saw it today with the Honourable Member from Edmonton Meadowlark. Under the threat of being recalled, government MLAs might think twice about supporting a bad or unpopular policy or bill. I am sure that there are more than a few members on the other side of this House, particularly in rural areas, who would have voted differently on Bill 50 if their constituents had power to recall them. There is no question this government would not have taken years to change the new royalty framework, a very bad piece of legislation that hurt thousands of Albertans and many entrepreneurs lost their business. Bill 50 is actually a perfect example of why recall legislation is urgently needed. This bill bestowed on government the power to unilaterally expropriate lands they deem necessary for power lines. As every rural MLA in this House knows, the bill was massively unpopular, and I'm sure every single one of them received calls from their constituents asking them to vote against it. But that's not how this place works, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't matter what constituents want, it only matters what the party wants. And MLAs who were explicitly and overwhelmingly told to defeat the bill ended up supporting it because the accountability is in the wrong place. Mr. Speaker, if that's not dysfunctional democracy, I don't know what is. Bill 208 would have gone a long way towards Bill 50's rightful defeat. Instead, we are stuck with another bad law that is foisting billions and billions of taxpayers' dollars on a massive infrastructure project that isn't even needed. And again, as the honourable member from Edmonton Centre just said, to add to that bill that she wonders where all of the add-ons come from. The current culture of caucus discipline is contributing to bad legislation. MLAs answer to a small group of political leaders who can and often do devise bad laws and bad policy. We need to make MLAs accountable to their constituents first and foremost. That's exactly what Bill 208 would do. Some in this House may be concerned that having a recall law could lead to frivolous recall campaigns motivated by more personal reasons than matters of public interest. Bill 208 contains the right safeguards against such instances. A notarized petition with the signatures of 33% of that constituency's population collected within a 60-day period must be presented in order for a recall and a by-election to take place. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, this is a very high threshold. There would simply be no way for a personal or narrow-minded recall campaign to garner that kind of support. Given that 33% often exceeds voter turnout in some Alberta constituencies, this threshold would likely only be reached in the event of an urgent matter of public interest, like Bill 50 or Bill 29 that's been thrown in front of this House. It's thrown out quickly, and there's little time for debate or people to get forces motivated. And so to them I would say this point. We need to have something in place that makes us accountable to the people who voted for us, not just on election day, but on every day in between. Hear, hear. As I have explained, there are many reasons why voters may come to realize that they elected the wrong person to represent them in the legislature, and right now they have no way of making that change. Accountability is critical in all walks of life, in business, and I believe most important for a great representative government. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, the power must rest with the people, not just once every 3 or 5 years, but every day. When people have no voice, they have no interest. When one has power and authority, one will use it when needed. I would argue, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Alberta would engage in politics at a much higher level if they had a process to control elected representatives when they go astray. That it seems evident to myself, being in this House for several years now, that the lack of accountability is our biggest problem. That we have elected representatives that, though they may understand the bill, that they're told by the party that this is the best we can do, you need to support it, and you're not allowed to speak out. And again, we see that we have to suffer here in the province. I'd like to talk a little bit about our health care system and why accountability is so important. The previous health minister created a super board, a super disaster. There was nothing the people of Alberta could do about that, though, until the next election, and that they will do in the next election. But we need accountability when bad bills are coming forward. There's no way for the people to stop it. Bill 29 is a classic case where Albertans are outraged, and this government, in a short time period of 2 weeks, is going to want to thrust that bill through, and they have the numbers to do it. But if, in fact, the people from Calgary Shaw wanted to start a petition tomorrow to recall that minister, I believe that minds would be changed at the level of accountability. But, Mr. Speaker, Bill 208 is about accountability. It's about an open and honest and clear government that is always accountable to the people, because the people ultimately hold that power. During an election, they turn that over to an elected representative, but with recall at any time, for whatever reason, when an MLA is out of touch, they can be recalled and held accountable. And that's the most important thing with a good democratic government. Are we and can we be held accountable? I would urge all members to vote for this. We look forward to the debate and hope that it passes so we're all more accountable to the people we've been elected to represent. Thank you.